Stop it right now! The fiancée screamed, her voice slicing through the elegant silence of the grand foyer like a whip crack. The little boy, no more than 4 years old, froze in his tracks. His tiny body went rigid, small hands still outstretched toward the gleaming crystal vase on the antique side table that had caught his curious eye. He didn't burst into loud sobs or run away in terror. Instead, those big, expressive hazel eyes, so full of wonder just moments before, filled with confusion and a deep, instinctive fear. He clutched desperately at the hem of his mother's crisp maid uniform, seeking the safety he always found there. The maid, his mother, stood completely paralyzed a few feet away, her face turning ashen as if all the blood had drained from it in an instant. Every member of the household staff present in the expansive foyer, the butler polishing silver, the gardener who had stepped inside for a moment, fell into a stunned, heavy silence. The air itself seemed to thicken with tension. Then, from the sweeping staircase that curved gracefully up to the second floor of this opulent penthouse style estate, came the sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps, slow at first, then gaining purpose. The tech billionaire who owned this entire world of luxury had heard every single word of the confrontation, and in the next 60 seconds, the lives of everyone under that roof would be irrevocably altered forever. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're joining us for the first time, I'm thrilled you're here. Drop a comment right now and tell me exactly where in the world you're watching from. Whether it's a bustling city in Asia, a quiet town in Europe, or somewhere sunny in the Americas. I love connecting with all of you through these stories. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please do it right now. We share heartfelt tales here that explore the complexities of family, love, redemption, and the hidden truths that bind us. Today's story is one that will stay with you long after it ends. Stay until the very last moment because the final twist and the emotional resolution will completely shift how you see every character involved. You might even find yourself reflecting on your own life. Some residences look like they belong in architectural magazines or luxury films, flawless from the outside, exuding wealth and perfection. But those living inside understand the fragile realities beneath the surface. The Sterling Tower estate was one such place. Perched high above the glittering city skyline, it was a marvel of modern design. Towering glass walls that offered panoramic views of twinkling lights at night, an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the horizon, meticulously landscaped private gardens with exotic plants that bloomed regardless of season, and interiors adorned with rare art pieces, custom furniture, and technology that anticipated every need. From the winding private driveway, lined with sculptural trees and security gates, it appeared as the ultimate symbol of achievement, the kind of home that represented years of relentless ambition. Inside, the atmosphere was one of refined, calm, subtle scents of fresh-cut orchids from the on-site conservatory, mingling with the rich aroma of aged leather from the library and hints of expensive cologne. But in the less glamorous service areas, tucked away from the main living spaces, a woman named Elena went about her duties with a quiet, unwavering dedication. Elena was 29 years old, possessing a natural grace with her warm olive skin, dark wavy hair usually pulled back into a neat, practical bun to keep it out of the way during work, and kind eyes that had seen their share of hardships. For almost 5 years, she had been a vital part of the household staff at the Sterling estate. Her days began long before the sun rose over the city, involving preparing gourmet breakfasts, ensuring every surface gleamed, managing laundry that included delicate silks and linens, and attending to countless small tasks that kept the mansion running seamlessly. She moved like a shadow, efficient, unobtrusive, never seeking praise or attention. Her entire world, however, centered on one bright light, her 4-year-old son, Mateo. Mateo was a bundle of energy wrapped in curiosity, with a mop of unruly curly hair that always seemed to have a mind of its own, chubby cheeks that dimpled when he smiled, and an infectious giggle that could warm even the coldest room. He had his mother's resilience but his own spark, spending his days in a small designated corner of the service kitchen or play area, occupied with a handmade wooden train set that Elena had carefully crafted for him from scraps during her rare free time. He was remarkably well behaved for his age, understanding instinctively that this grand house wasn't a playground for him. He never touched things he shouldn't, never raised his voice, always staying close to his mother like a little shadow. Elena had no family support network nearby, no grandparents or siblings to help with childcare. Life had been challenging since she became a single mother, and this job provided the stability they both desperately needed. Mr. Alexander Sterling, the brilliant tech entrepreneur who had founded and grown a multi-billion-dollar company specializing in cutting-edge data security and AI solutions, had always been quietly tolerant of Mateo's presence. He never complained when he glimpsed the boy during his rare moments of downtime. In fact, sometimes when Alexander would wander into the kitchen late at night after a long day in his home office, seeking a simple snack, he would pause. His sharp eyes would soften just a fraction as they landed on Mateo playing quietly or Elena working. There was something in his expression, a fleeting warmth, almost like a distant recognition, but Elena never dared to question it. In her position, you didn't ask questions. You simply did your job and protected what mattered most. This careful equilibrium had existed for years, a fragile peace in the midst of luxury, until 8 months ago when Sophia Lang burst into their lives like a sudden storm. Sophia was 27, strikingly beautiful in a way that turned heads everywhere she went. Tall and slender, with platinum blonde hair that cascaded in perfect waves, piercing blue eyes that could convey both charm and ice, and an air of sophistication honed by years in high society. She had met Alexander at a prestigious charity gala and quickly captivated him with her intelligence, ambition, and shared interest in the tech world. Within weeks, she was a constant presence at the estate. 2 months later, she had moved in. 4 months after that, the massive diamond engagement ring sparkled on her finger. The staff, a small team of 5 dedicated professionals, quickly learned to navigate Sophia's demanding personality. She had very specific opinions on everything: the precise temperature for each room, the arrangement of fresh flowers, the menu for dinners, even how the towels should be folded in the guest bathrooms. But her most vehement objections were reserved for Mateo. From early on, she made her feelings clear in subtle and not so subtle ways. Why does that child always seem to be lurking around? She had remarked one evening during an intimate dinner party, her voice carrying just far enough for Elena, who was serving discreetly in the background, to hear every syllable. The estate manager had attempted a careful defense, noting how quiet and unobtrusive Mateo was. But Sophia was unmoved. This is not a nursery or a daycare center. It's a home for adults building an empire. Elena had lowered her gaze, said nothing, and continued her work. She had become expert at swallowing the pain, the humiliation, all for the sake of keeping her job and providing a roof over Mateo's head. Have you ever had to bite your tongue so hard it hurt just to protect the one person who means everything to you? That's the strength Elena embodied every single day. But no amount of silence could prevent the inevitable collision that morning. It was a crisp, clear autumn day in late October. The city below was painted in shades of gold and red from the changing leaves. Sophia had come downstairs earlier than her usual routine, dressed in a luxurious designer lounge set, her hair perfectly styled even for a casual morning, tablet in hand as she reviewed emails and schedules. Meanwhile, Mateo had woken up with the kind of boundless excitement only young children possess. Earlier that week, during a brief supervised outing in the private gardens, he had discovered a small polished silver coin half buried near the edge of the fountain. To him, it was the greatest treasure imaginable, shiny, mysterious, something from another world. He had kept it safely in his pocket, polishing it secretly with his sleeve whenever he could. That morning, unable to contain his joy any longer, he had slipped quietly out of the kitchen while Elena was momentarily distracted with preparing breakfast trays. His little feet in soft socks padded across the cool marble floors of the grand foyer, the coin clutched tightly in his fist. He was examining it under the natural light streaming through the massive windows when Sophia descended the last few steps. Startled by her sudden appearance, Mateo took a small step back, his foot catching slightly on the edge of a rug. The coin slipped from his grasp and rolled across the polished floor with a soft tinkling sound, coming to rest right near Sophia's designer slippers. Without thinking, the toddler reached out toward it, his face lighting up with innocent delight. "Look! Shiny!" he called out in his high-pitched, enthusiastic voice, holding up his empty hand as if presenting the wonder to her. For a split second, there might have been a flicker of something soft in Sophia's expression, perhaps the universal pull of a child's pure joy, but it vanished instantly. "Stop it right now!" she screamed, her voice sharp and commanding, echoing off the high ceilings and marble surfaces. "What on earth are you doing in here? This is not your play area. Go back where you belong." Mateo's small shoulders hunched, his lower lip beginning to tremble as tears welled up in those hazel eyes. He backed away slowly, the excitement draining from his face like water down a drain. Elena came rushing around the corner from the kitchen at that exact moment, her apron still lightly dusted with flour from rolling dough for fresh pastries. Her heart leaped into her throat at the scene. "Miss Lang, I am so incredibly sorry," she said breathlessly, her voice trembling with fear and apology. "He only got away for a second. It won't happen again. I promise." She scooped Mateo up into her arms immediately, holding him close against her chest, feeling his little body shaking. But Sophia was far from appeased. She placed her tablet down on a nearby console table with a loud, deliberate click that sounded like a judge's gavel. Turning fully to face Elena and the child, her beautiful features hardened into lines of frustration. This is precisely what I've been saying for months. I've tried to be patient, but enough is enough. A child has no place wandering freely in the main areas of this house. It disrupts everything. This is supposed to be my home soon, and I refuse to share it with constant interruptions and chaos. Her gaze shifted between them, cold and final. I want you both gone. Pack your things and leave by the end of today. No extensions, no discussions. The command landed like a physical blow. Elena's arms tightened protectively around Mateo, her mind racing through 1,000 desperate thoughts. Where would they go? How would she find new work with no references? Please, Miss Lang, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He's only 4 years old. He didn't mean any harm. It was just a moment of curiosity. I'll make sure he's never in your way again. Tears pricked at the corners of her own eyes, but she fought them back. Mateo buried his face deep into his mother's neck, going completely still and silent in a way frightened children sometimes do, as if trying to disappear. The silver coin lay abandoned on the floor between them, forgotten in the storm. The tension in the foyer was suffocating. No one dared move or speak, and then those footsteps from above grew louder, more insistent. Alexander Sterling, 34 years old, the self-made tech titan whose company had disrupted entire industries with revolutionary encryption software and AI-driven security systems, emerged at the top of the floating modern staircase. He had been in his glass-walled home office overlooking the city, reviewing quarterly reports, when the raised voices had carried clearly through the open architectural design of the house. He had heard it all, every accusation, every plea. Alexander was a-fined by his intensity. Tall with sharp jawline, neatly trimmed dark hair, and an aura of focused power that came from years of building an empire from a small startup in a tiny apartment. He was brilliant, often described in business magazines as visionary and driven, but also reserved, sometimes emotionally distant due to the demands of his work. He rarely showed vulnerability. Yet over the years, he had developed a habit of noticing the small, overlooked details in life, the quiet efficiency of his staff, the subtle rhythms of the household, the way certain people carried themselves with dignity despite their roles. He had noticed Elena particularly, her reliability, her gentle way with tasks, and young Mateo with his careful play and occasional shy glances. There had been fleeting moments where Alexander felt an inexplicable pull, a sense of familiarity he couldn't quite place, but he had always pushed it aside in favor of deadlines and deals. He descended the stairs with measured steps, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp and attentive. Sophia turned toward him, her posture shifting from confrontational to one seeking validation. Alex, thank goodness. This situation with the child has been escalating for too long. He was running around again, causing a scene right in the middle of the foyer. Alexander didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked steadily past Sophia, his focus entirely on Elena, and the small boy in her arms. Without hesitation, he lowered himself to one knee on the cool marble floor, right there in his multi-million-dollar home, bringing his tall frame down to the level of a frightened 4-year-old. It was a striking image, one of the most powerful men in the tech world, dressed in a crisp button down shirt and tailored trousers, now eye to eye with a toddler. "Hey there, buddy," Alexander said in a voice gentler than anyone in the room had ever heard from him. "I saw you found something really special. You dropped it, didn't you?" He reached out slowly, picked up the shiny silver coin from the floor, and held it out in his open palm. Mateo peeked out from behind his mother's shoulder, his eyes still watery but curious. After a long moment of hesitation, the boy extended his tiny hand and took the coin back, his fingers closing around it. "Shiny," he whispered softly, almost inaudible. Alexander nodded, a small, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time that morning. "Yes, it is very shiny. Good find." He stayed crouched for another second, as if memorizing the boy's features, before rising to his full height. Turning to face Sophia, his expression became serious, unyielding. "Elena and Mateo are not going anywhere. Not today, not ever. They are part of this household." Sophia's perfectly sculpted face registered shock, then anger. Her blue eyes widened. "You're serious? You're choosing the maid and her kid over your own fiancée? Over everything we've planned together?" Her voice rose again, echoing the earlier scream, but now laced with disbelief and hurt. Alexander's response was measured, but there was steel beneath the calm. "This isn't a choice between you and them, Sophia. There's a much deeper truth here that I need to address." He glanced at Elena, who was still holding Mateo tightly, her face a mask of stunned confusion and emerging hope. "Elena, I need to speak with you alone for a few minutes. Sophia, please give us some privacy. We'll talk after." The foyer emptied as staff discreetly retreated. Once alone with Elena and Mateo, who had dozed off from emotional exhaustion in his mother's arms, Alexander looked at her with an intensity that pierced through years of unspoken history. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice low and cracking slightly for the first time in memory. "All this time. Why?" Elena's breath caught sharply in her throat. Tears she had held back for so long began to spill down her cheeks. "Tell you what, Mr. Sterling," but even as she said it, her eyes betrayed the knowledge. The way Mateo's hazel eyes mirrored Alexander's late mother's eyes in old family photos she had once glimpsed. The subtle resemblance in the curve of the smile, the shape of the chin. Alexander stepped closer, his usual commanding presence softened by raw emotion. "He's my son, isn't he? Mateo. I see it now. I've seen pieces of it for months, but didn't let myself believe it. Those eyes, they're exactly like my mother's." What unfolded next was a revelation that rewound the clock on both their lives. 4.5 years earlier, long before Alexander Sterling became a household name in tech, he was a driven but overworked executive climbing the ladder at breakneck speed. Elena, at the time a talented young event coordinator, trying to establish herself in the competitive hospitality industry after her own family struggles, had crossed paths with him at a prestigious international tech conference held in a grand convention center downtown. Their meeting wasn't at one of the flashy keynote sessions or networking parties. It happened in a quiet side corridor during a break where both had escaped the crowds for different reasons. Alexander to clear his head from investor pressures, Elena to catch her breath after managing a chaotic catering setup. What started as a polite exchange about the overwhelming atmosphere turned into a deep, genuine conversation that lasted nearly 2 hours. They talked about ambitions, the loneliness of chasing big dreams, the sacrifices involved, shared laughs over quirky industry stories, and vulnerabilities they rarely voiced to others. There was an instant, profound connection, the kind that feels faded. Over the following weeks, they met a handful more times in secret, stolen moments in quiet cafes, late night walks in the park, conversations that made the world feel smaller and more meaningful. A brief but intensely passionate romance bloomed amid Alexander's increasingly demanding schedule as his company began its explosive growth phase. Then reality intervened. Alexander was pulled into nonstop travel, funding rounds, product launches, and 80-hour work weeks. Communication became sporadic, then silent as assistants filtered everything. When Elena discovered she was pregnant a month after their last meeting, she tried desperately to reach him. Phone calls, emails, even a letter sent through official channels all went unanswered or were lost in the whirlwind of his new success. She assumed he had chosen to move on, prioritizing his empire. Heartbroken but determined, she decided to raise the child on her own. By the time she learned years later that his assistants had been overly aggressive in screening personal matters, and that Alexander had never actually received her messages, too much time had passed. Mateo was already a toddler. Elena had built walls of protection around them both. Fate, or perhaps a quiet desperation for stability, led her to apply for the housekeeping position at what she thought was just another wealthy client's estate. On her first day, the shock of realizing it belonged to Alexander nearly made her quit. But the pay, the benefits, the chance for Mateo to have some security, it was too vital to walk away from. So she stayed silent, watching from the periphery as Alexander built his life, wondering if he would ever see the truth in the boy, who looked so much like his own family line. Now, in the sunlit foyer, with Mateo sleeping peacefully, the truth poured out. Alexander listened without interruption, his face a canvas of regret, awe, and emerging love. "I never knew," he said quietly, voice thick with emotion. "I would have been there every step." He reached out tentatively and brushed a stray curl from Mateo's forehead. The boy stirred slightly but didn't wake. "He's mine, our son." The silence that followed was profound, filled with the weight of lost years, quiet sacrifices, and the beginning of healing. Elena cried softly, years of buried pain releasing. Alexander stood there, the billionaire who had everything material, but was now confronting the most important thing he had missed. Later that afternoon, Sophia confronted Alexander in his private study, the room filled with monitors and books on innovation. "This isn't happening," she said from the doorway, her voice a mix of anger and fragility. "That child, he's not yours, right?" The truth hit her like a wave. For a long moment she stood frozen. Then something shifted. Beneath the polished exterior and the earlier outburst lay her own deep, private struggles. For years, Sophia had been battling undisclosed health issues. complications from a past condition that made the prospect of biological children uncertain at best. She had discovered this devastating news in a doctor's office months before, carrying the fear and grief alone, terrified it would make her less in Alexander's eyes as they planned their future. Their conversation that day was one of the most honest they had ever shared. No screaming matches, but raw vulnerability. Alexander listened as Sophia poured out her insecurities, her desire for a family clashing with her body's realities. He shared his own shock and the emerging bond with Mateo. It wasn't about blame. It was two people realizing they had been living parallel lives of silent pain. By the end, tears were shed, apologies exchanged. The engagement ended not in bitterness, but in a sad, mature understanding that their paths had diverged. Over the next 3 weeks, Sophia packed her belongings gradually. There were long talks, moments of reflection. On her final day, as she prepared to leave, she paused in the foyer where it all began. Spotting Mateo playing quietly with his wooden trains, she crouched down, a gesture mirroring Alexander's earlier one. From her pocket, she pulled out a small, delicate silver pendant shaped like a star, similar in shine to the coin. "Here, little one, for your collection of shiny things," she said softly, her voice gentle for the first time. Mateo looked up with wide eyes, then smiled shyly. "Shiny, thank you." Sophia's eyes glistened as she stood, giving Elena a brief, awkward but sincere hug. "Take care of them," she whispered before walking out into the autumn afternoon without looking back. In the weeks and months that followed, Alexander embraced his role as a father with the same dedication he brought to business, but this time with heart. He cleared his schedule for important moments, asked Elena endless questions about every milestone he had missed. Mateo's first words, "Mama," and then trained the funny way he pronounced certain words. The bedtime stories Elena invented on the fly, the nights she stayed up soothing fevers, the pure joy when Mateo discovered new things like butterflies in the garden. They talked for hours, rebuilding the connection from that conference years ago, now layered with parenthood and maturity. Alexander made changes to the estate, creating a proper playroom filled with toys and books, ensuring Mateo had space to explore safely. Evenings became sacred. One particularly memorable night, as gentle rain tapped against the floor to ceiling windows, and the city lights sparkled. Below, Mateo, now more comfortable in his father's presence, toddled over to the large leather couch where Alexander was sitting reviewing documents. Without a word, the boy climbed up using a small step stool, wooden train clutched in one hand, and settled himself right into Alexander's lap as if it was the most natural place in the world. "Daddy story?" Mateo asked, looking up with those trusting hazel eyes that now held no fear, only love. Alexander felt something break open inside him. Walls built from years of corporate battles crumbling. He set aside his tablet, wrapped one strong arm carefully around his son's small shoulders, and began speaking. "Once upon a time, there was a man who was very busy chasing stars in the sky, but he didn't realize the brightest star was right here with him all along." His voice was unsteady with emotion as he continued the tale, weaving in elements of their real story. Mateo leaned back fully against him, content and safe. Elena stood quietly in the doorway to the living room, watching this scene unfold. Her hand flew to her mouth to stifle a sob of pure joy and relief. After 5 years of invisibility, of carrying the weight of single motherhood in silence, while surrounded by luxury that wasn't hers, this moment represented everything. The grief of lost time mixed with overwhelming gratitude for the second chance. The silver coin now sat polished on a special shelf in Mateo's new room, a daily reminder of how one small discovery had changed their destinies. This story, at its core, reminds us that life's most profound shifts often begin with the smallest, most unexpected moments: a child's innocent shiny, a scream in a hallway, a man choosing to kneel. The people who seem peripheral might hold the missing pieces of our hearts. It challenges us to slow down, to truly see those around us, to listen beyond the surface noise. Who in your life has been waiting quietly, patiently for you to notice them? A family member, a friend, perhaps even yourself in some way. Don't wait for a crisis to open your eyes. If this tale moved you, and I truly hope it did, with its layers of pain, truth, and healing, please give it a thumbs up or like right now. It helps more than you know. Leave a comment below sharing which part touched you deepest. The coin in the foyer, the private revelations, Sophia's graceful exit, or the tender father son moment on the couch. I read them all. And if you're not already part of our community, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this one that celebrate the human spirit. There are more heartfelt journeys coming soon. Until next time, take care and keep paying attention to the quiet wonders around you.